What is the true value of a warning? For Elena, a waitress struggling to make ends meet, it was a risk that could cost her everything. For Julian Croft, a self-made tech millionaire, it was a single sentence on a napkin that would shatter the foundation of his world. He thought he had it all: a thriving company, immense wealth, and a best friend he trusted like a brother. He was wrong. This is the incredible true story of how one woman's courage to speak up about a whispered conversation exposed a devastating betrayal, and how the very next day, a black Bentley Continental GT showed up at her door, changing her life forever. What she did next will surprise you. The fluorescent lights of the Daily Grind diner hummed a monotonous tune, a sound as familiar to Elena Petrova as her own heartbeat. It was the soundtrack to her life, the sizzle of burgers on the griddle, the clatter of ceramic plates, the low murmur of conversations that blended into a single indistinct buzz. For the past 3 years, this diner in the less glamorous part of Austin, Texas, was her stage. She played her part with weary precision, balancing plates on one arm, a coffee pot in the other hand, and a smile on her face that rarely reached her tired grey eyes. Her life was a carefully constructed Jenga tower of bills, rent, and daycare costs for her 6-year-old daughter Lily. Every shift, every tip was a block she carefully placed, praying the whole thing wouldn't come crashing down. Then there was Mr. Croft. Julian Croft was a paradox in the greasy spoon world of the daily grind. He would arrive twice sometimes, 3 times a week, always in a simple, well-fitted t-shirt and jeans, a stark contrast to the headlines that occasionally flashed on the diner's corner TV. Croft Innovations soars, Austin's homegrown billionaire. He never acted the part. He'd slide into the same worn red vinyl booth at the back, order a black coffee and a plain omelette, and read a physical book, its pages dog-eared and worn. He was kind in a quiet, unassuming way. He always made eye contact, said "please" and "thank you," and left a $50 tip on a $10 bill, a gesture that was the difference between making rent with ease or with a prayer. Elena never fawned over him. She treated him like any other customer, which she suspected was precisely why he kept coming back. He wasn't Julian Croft, the tech mogul here. He was just Julian, the guy in booth 7 who liked his coffee black. He often came with his friend Marcus Thorne. If Julian was a quiet pond, Marcus was a roaring river. He was handsome with a movie star smile, an expensive watch that caught the light, and a laugh that filled the diner. He dressed in sharp, tailored suits that looked out of place next to the ketchup bottles. He was Julian's chief financial officer, and as Julian had once mentioned during a brief chat, his best friend since their dorm days at UT Austin. This man, Marcus had said once, slinging an arm around a smiling Julian, is the brains. I'm just the guy who makes sure he can afford to keep having brilliant ideas. To the outside world, they were the perfect team, the visionary and the pragmatist, the innovator and the financier. But Elena, a silent observer in the theater of daily life, saw things others missed. It was her survival instinct. She read people the way she read orders on a ticket, quickly, efficiently looking for the hidden details. And with Marcus, there were always details. A flicker of something in his eyes when Julian wasn't looking, a tightness in his jaw when he smiled, the way his charm seemed to be a switch he could flip on and off. When he spoke to Julian, he was all warmth and admiration. When he spoke to Elena, his eyes would glaze over, a dismissive, almost contemptuous coolness settling in. He saw a uniform, not a person. Julian saw a person, not a uniform. The difference was everything. Elena dismissed it as the casual arrogance of the rich. It wasn't her business. Her business was Lily was the rent, was getting through another 16-hour double shift. She had no stake in the lives of the men in Booth 7. She thought that right up until the rainy Tuesday afternoon, when everything changed. The rain came down in relentless sheets, turning the world outside the diner's windows into a blurry grey watercolor. The place was mostly empty, the lunchtime rush a distant memory. Elena was methodically wiping down tables, the scent of lemon cleaner mingling with the smell of old coffee. The bell over the door chimed, and Marcus Thorne walked in, alone, shaking a bespoke umbrella onto the welcome mat. "Elena," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "Julian's running a few minutes late. Traffic is a nightmare. Mind if I grab our usual booth?" "Of course, Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice neutral. He slid into the red vinyl booth and pulled out his phone, his thumb flying across the screen. Elena brought him a glass of water, which he ignored. She retreated behind the counter, pretending to be busy polishing the chrome coffee urns, but her attention was snagged by his presence. It was unusual to see him without Julian. A moment later, his phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID, and a strange expression crossed his face, a mix of annoyance and conspiratorial glee. He answered his voice, dropping to a low, urgent tone. "Don't call me on this line." He hissed, his eyes darting around the near-empty diner. He seemed to look right through Elena, dismissing her as part of the furniture. "Is it done?" Elena froze her hand, stilling on the urn. She knew she should walk away, go to the back, give him his privacy. But something in his tone, a venomous, sharp-edged quality she'd never heard before, held her captive. He listened for a moment, his knuckles white as he gripped his phone. "Good. And the final transfer documents for Project Nightingale. They need to be ready for his signature tomorrow. No, he won't suspect a thing. I've been running the numbers for him for 10 years. He trusts me implicitly." Project Nightingale. The name sounded so benign, so poetic, but the way Marcus said it, it sounded like a death sentence. "Listen to me carefully." Marcus continued, his voice, barely a whisper, now forcing Elena to strain to hear over the drumming of the rain. "The liquidation of the offshore holdings has to be seamless. When the main server is breached on Friday, all traces have to lead back to the phantom account in the Caymans. By the time he realizes what's happened, the board will have no choice. The stock will plummet. I'll initiate the buyout with our anonymous consortium, and Croft Innovations will be ours. He'll be left with nothing." Elena felt the air leave her lungs. It was like watching a snake shed its skin, revealing the cold, terrifying creature beneath. The charming, loyal best friend was a phantom. This was the real Marcus Thorne. "He's a sentimental fool," Marcus spat into the phone, a cruel sneer twisting his lips. "Still comes to this dump to remember where he came from. Well, by next week, he'll be right back where he started. Maybe he can get a job washing dishes here." He chuckled a low, ugly sound. "I have to go, he's pulling up. We'll speak tonight." He hung up. The switch was flipped. The sneer vanished, replaced by his signature warm smile, as the bell over the door chimed again. Julian Croft walked in, his hair damp from the rain, a familiar, easy-going grin on his face. "Marcus, sorry the traffic on the I-35 was brutal," Julian said, sliding into the booth opposite his friend. "Not a problem. My friend," Marcus said, his voice dripping with false sincerity, "gave me a chance to catch up on a few emails. Ready for the big meeting tomorrow. Project Nightingale is finally ready to fly." Elena's blood ran cold. She felt dizzy, her hand gripping the counter for support. Julian, oblivious, was beaming. "I can't believe it. After all this work, we're going to revolutionize data security, Marcus. This is our legacy." "Our legacy," Marcus echoed, but his eyes were like chips of ice. Elena watched them, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She saw a man about to walk off a cliff, holding hands with the person about to push him. And she, a waitress in a cheap diner, was the only one who saw it coming. Her mind raced. Say something to who? The police. They'd laugh her out of the station. Tell Julian directly he'd think she was a crazy star-struck employee looking for attention or a handout. He would never believe that his best friend, his brother in all but blood, was planning to utterly destroy him. She was trapped. To speak was to risk her job, her credibility, everything. To stay silent was to watch an act of profound evil unfold and do nothing. Her gaze drifted to a photo of Lily tucked into the side of the cash register, her daughter's bright, innocent smile, a beacon in her murky world. What kind of person would she be? What lesson would she be teaching her daughter if she chose the coward's path? Her decision, terrifying and absolute, settled in her soul. She had to warn him. But how the rest of their meal was a blur of forced composure for Eleanor. She refilled their coffees, her hand trembling so slightly she prayed they wouldn't notice. She took their order, her voice a little too high, a little too tight. Julian didn't seem to register anything amiss, lost in an enthusiastic discussion with Marcus about the technical specifications of Project Nightingale. Marcus, however, was a different story. A few times Elena caught his gaze. His eyes narrowed a flicker of suspicion in their depths. Did he sense her unease? Had he seen her listening? She quickly looked away, each time her heart hammering against her ribs. She felt like a spy in enemy territory, her cover about to be blown. She knew she couldn't speak to Julian directly, not with Marcus, sitting right there watching her like a hawk. The risk was too great. He would deny everything, paint her as unstable, and ensure she was fired before she even finished her sentence. She needed a way to deliver a message that was discreet, deniable, and urgent. Her eyes landed on the dispenser of cheap paper napkins on the counter. It was a desperate, flimsy idea, but it was the only one she had. While they were talking, she grabbed a pen from her apron pocket, her palm slick with sweat. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing mind. What could she write? It had to be short, powerful, and specific enough to be believable. She couldn't just write, "Your friend is betraying you." He would crumple it up and toss it away. She needed a key, a word that would unlock the door of his doubt. Project Nightingale. Her pen hovered over the napkin. She had to get the wording exactly right. It needed to be a warning, not an accusation, a seed of doubt, not a declaration of war. After a moment's frantic thought, she wrote her handwriting, shaky but clear, Mr. Croft. Your life is not my business, but I couldn't live with myself if I said nothing. Be very careful of Marcus Thorne. Project Nightingale is not what you think. Don't trust the numbers he shows you tomorrow. Have an independent third party look at the offshore accounts. Please just look. She folded the small square of paper, twice her heart pounding. It felt like a bomb in her hand. This tiny piece of paper could detonate a lifelong friendship, and just as easily her own fragile existence. If Marcus found it, she would be finished. Not just fired, but possibly worse. A man willing to steal billions would not hesitate to crush a waitress who got in his way. The moment came when they finished their meal. Julian pulled out his wallet to pay. It was now or never. "I'll get this," Marcus said, smoothly reaching for the check. "A small celebration before our big day tomorrow." "You don't have to, Marcus," Julian said with a smile. "I insist." Elena's plan was falling apart. If Marcus paid, she'd have no reason to hand anything to Julian. Her mind raced. She had to create an opening. As she walked toward their table with the check, she accidentally stumbled, jostling the coffee pot in her hand. A few drops of hot coffee splashed onto the table perilously close to Marcus's expensive suit jacket. "Oh my goodness, I am so sorry." She gasped her apology, sounding genuinely mortified, because in part it was. Marcus recoiled, a flash of pure fury on his face before he masked it. "Watch it," he snapped. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Thorne," she repeated, dabbing at the small spill with a cloth. In that moment of distraction, as Marcus was fussing over his jacket, her other hand moved with lightning speed. She placed the check on the table directly in front of Julian, and with the check she slipped the folded napkin, tucking it just under the edge of his saucer. Her fingers brushed his for a fraction of a second. He looked up at her, a question in his eyes. She gave him a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. Her gaze filled with a desperate urgency. She prayed he would understand. Then she turned her attention back to Marcus. "Is your jacket all right, sir?" "It's fine," he said dismissively, his focus now back on Julian. "Forget it." Elena retreated, her legs feeling like jelly. She watched from behind the counter, her whole body tense. The napkin sat there, a white square of potential doom. Julian picked up the check and the napkin with it. For a terrifying second, she thought he would just leave it, mistake it for trash. But he didn't. His brow furrowed slightly. He must have felt that it was separate from the check. While Marcus was pulling out his credit card, Julian discreetly palmed the napkin. He didn't open it. He simply slipped it into the pocket of his jeans as he stood up. "Thanks for lunch, Marcus," Julian said, his voice unchanged. "I'll see you tomorrow morning. Big day." "The biggest," Marcus replied, clapping him on the back. They walked out of the diner and into the rain. Elena watched them go, her breath held tight in her chest. She had done it. She had passed the message. She felt no relief, only a profound and terrifying dread. She had lit the fuse. Now all she could do was wait for the explosion. Julian Croft didn't read the napkin until he was in the sanctuary of his car, a surprisingly modest Tesla that belied his billionaire status. The rain drummed a soft tattoo on the roof as he pulled the folded piece of paper from his pocket. He smoothed it out on the passenger seat. His first reaction, a mix of confusion and irritation. Be very careful of Marcus Thorne. Project Nightingale is not what you think. His immediate instinct was to laugh it off. It was absurd. Marcus. His best friend. The man who had been his groomsman, the godfather to his non-existent children. They'd always joked about the man who had celebrated every win and weathered every storm with him for over a decade. It was a prank, or worse, a malicious attempt by some random waitress to stir up trouble. He crumpled the napkin, ready to toss it into the console, but his hand paused. Have an independent third party look at the offshore accounts. The specificity of it was unsettling. How would a waitress know about offshore accounts and Project Nightingale? That name was known only to a handful of top-level executives at his company. It wasn't public knowledge. A cold unease began to seep into his bones, pushing past the wall of his loyalty. He thought back to the diner. The waitress Elena, her name tag read, had seemed desperate. The way she'd slipped him the note, the urgent look in her eyes. It hadn't felt malicious. It had felt like a warning. His mind began to race, connecting dots he hadn't even realized were there. Small things. Marcus's recent insistence on using a new, incredibly complex routing system for their international funds, a system so convoluted even Julian had trouble following it. Marcus's new car, a flashy McLaren he'd claimed he bought with some lucky crypto investments. The hushed phone calls he would take, always stepping out of the office. Julian had dismissed it all. He trusted Marcus. Trust was the bedrock of their entire relationship, the cornerstone of their business. To doubt Marcus was to doubt himself, to doubt the last 15 years of his life. But the napkin sat there a silent accusation. He drove not to his sleek downtown apartment, but to a quiet, unassuming office building in a suburb north of Austin. It was the office of Arthur Davies, a man who looked more like a retired librarian than the sharpest forensic accountant in Texas. Julian had used him once years ago during a hostile acquisition. Davies was a ghost, discreet, brilliant, and loyal only to the numbers. "Julian," Arthur said, surprised, looking up from his paper-strewn desk, "to what do I owe the pleasure? I hope you're not in another jam." "I hope not, too, Arthur," Julian said, his voice grim. He placed the crumpled napkin on the desk. "But I have a bad feeling. I need you to do something for me, and it needs to be off the books, completely invisible. I need you to look into my own company." Arthur read the napkin, his expression unreadable. He looked at Julian over the top of his spectacles. "You want me to audit your CFO, Marcus Thorne?" "I want you to prove this note is wrong," Julian said, his voice strained. "I want you to show me that I'm being paranoid, and that this is all a big misunderstanding. I need you to look at everything related to Project Nightingale and all associated offshore accounts. I'll give you my top-level security clearance, my personal access codes, everything. But he can't know. No one can." For the next 18 hours, Julian lived in a state of suspended animation. He went home and pretended everything was normal. He answered a cheerful call from Marcus, discussing their plans for the 9 a.m. board meeting, his own voice sounding hollow and strange in his ears. Every word of friendship from Marcus now felt like a drop of poison. He didn't sleep. He sat in his darkened living room, the panoramic view of the Austin skyline a blur as he paced and waited. With every passing hour, the dread grew a cold, heavy thing in the pit of his stomach. He was hoping, praying for Arthur to call and say it was all a false alarm. The call came at 5:17 a.m. "Julian." Arthur's voice was quiet, grave. "You need to come back to my office. Now, and you need to brace yourself." Julian's heart stopped. He knew even before he got in his car that his world was about to end. In Arthur's office, the truth was laid out in a series of spreadsheets and transaction logs on a large monitor. It was far worse than Julian could have ever imagined. Project Nightingale, the revolutionary security software he had poured his soul into, was a Trojan horse. Marcus had built in a back door, a flaw he planned to exploit himself. The numbers were a horror story. For the past 2 years, Marcus had been systematically siphoning funds, millions of dollars, through a web of shell corporations, with names that meant nothing: Nightingale Holdings, Thorne Ventures, Cygnus Investments, all leading back to a single anonymous master account in the Cayman Islands. He had been falsifying quarterly reports, cooking the books with such masterful skill that no one had suspected a thing. The final phase, which was to be initiated tomorrow, was the masterstroke. Marcus would present slightly doctored, but still impressive projections to the board, securing Julian's final sign-off. Then on Friday, he would trigger the security breach through the back door he created, crashing the system and losing a massive amount of corporate and client data. The stock would tank catastrophically. The board would panic. And then a neutral third-party consortium, funded by the very money Marcus had stolen, would sweep in with a low-ball offer to buy a controlling stake in the company, saving it from ruin. The board would have no choice but to accept. The consortium was, of course, a front for Marcus Thorne. He wouldn't just be stealing from Julian. He was planning to steal his entire company, his life's work, using Julian's own money to do it, and leaving Julian to take the fall for the catastrophic security failure. Julian stared at the screen, at the intricate web of deceit his best friend had woven. It was a betrayal so complete, so profound, it felt physical, like a knife twisting in his gut. Every shared laugh, every handshake, every word of encouragement from Marcus over the past decade was a lie. He felt a wave of nausea, followed by a cold, silent rage. He looked at Arthur, his face pale. He was going to leave me with nothing. "Less than nothing, Julian," Arthur said softly. "He was going to leave you with the blame." Julian stood up, his mind, strangely calm, the chaos of his emotions solidifying into a diamond-hard point of clarity. He knew what he had to do. But first, there was someone he had to see. Someone he had to thank. The one person who had told him the truth when everyone else was telling him lies. The waitress. Elena. Elena didn't sleep. Every time a car drove past her small apartment building, she flinched her mind, conjuring images of Marcus Thorne coming to silence her. She imagined being fired her boss, a gruff man named Sal, telling her she was a troublemaker. She imagined the $50 tips from Mr. Croft disappearing, and her fragile Jenga tower of finances finally collapsing. She got Lily ready for school, with a knot of anxiety in her stomach. She plastered on a smile, made pancakes she couldn't eat, and waved goodbye at the bus stop, her heart aching with fear. She had the day off from the diner, but the relief of it was soured by the waiting. Around 10 a.m., she was washing the few breakfast dishes when she heard it. A low, powerful rumble, a sound completely alien to her neighborhood of aging sedans and beat-up trucks. She peered through the blinds of her living room window. Her heart leapt into her throat. Parked on the street directly in front of her building was a car. It wasn't just a car, it was a statement. A long, impossibly sleek black Bentley Continental GT, its polished chrome glinting even in the overcast morning light. It looked like a panther that had wandered into a petting zoo. Windows were tinted, hiding whoever was inside. This was it. It had to be Marcus. He'd found out. He'd come to threaten her, to buy her silence, to make her disappear. Her breath came in ragged gasps. Neighbors were already peeking out of their own windows, drawn by the silent, opulent spectacle. She backed away from the window, her mind racing. Should she call the police? What would she say? A rich man is trying to ruin his friend, and now there's an expensive car outside my apartment. They'd think she was insane. Then the driver's side door opened. Elena braced herself. But the man who stepped out wasn't Marcus Thorne. It was Julian Croft. He looked different than he did at the diner. He was wearing a dark, impeccably tailored suit, and the easygoing demeanor was gone, replaced by a heavy solemnity. He looked older, the lines around his eyes deeper than they had been the day before. He stood by the magnificent car for a moment, his gaze fixed on her apartment window, as if he knew she was watching. Then he started walking towards her front door. Elena's panic was replaced by a wave of confusion. Why was he here? Was he angry? Did he think she was a liar? Was he here to tell her to stay out of his business? Her hand trembled as she heard the soft, polite knock on her door. She took a deep breath and opened it. He stood on her small, worn-out welcome mat, looking as out of place as his car. For a moment, they just stood there, in silence. "Miss Petrova," he said, finally, his voice quiet and hoarse. "Elena, may I come in for a moment?" She could only nod, stepping back to let him into her tiny, clean apartment. It was a world away from the life he knew. The furniture was second-hand, but well cared for. A small stack of Lily's picture books sat on the coffee table. A crayon drawing of a smiling sun was taped to the wall. He took it all in his expression, unreadable. "I imagine you're wondering why I'm here," he said, turning to face her. Yes," she stammered. "Is everything all right, Mr. Croft?" A sad, humorless smile touched his lips. "No." Everything is not all right, but it's not a complete disaster. Thanks to you." Relief washed over her so intensely her knees felt weak. "So you looked into it. You believed me. I didn't want to." He admitted, his voice raw with pain. "I wanted you to be wrong. I wanted you to be a crazy person with a grudge. It would have been so much easier. But you weren't wrong." He took a deep breath, the confession costing him dearly. "Marcus, my best friend, was planning to take everything from me. Everything. And you, a stranger, were the only person who had the courage to warn me." He looked directly into her eyes, and for the first time, she saw the full weight of the billionaire, not the casual diner patron. She saw the power, but also a profound, aching vulnerability. He was going to sign the papers this morning at 9 a.m., the first step in his plan. The board meeting was scheduled. If your note had come an hour later, a day later, it would have been too late. I would have walked right into his trap. He shook his head, a look of disbelief still on his face. "You didn't just save my company, Elena. You saved my life's work. You saved me." Tears pricked at Elena's eyes. The fear and anxiety of the last day finally broke, replaced by a wave of overwhelming emotion. I heard him on the phone. He sounded so cruel. I couldn't just do nothing. Doing nothing is what most people would have done, Julian said softly. It was the safe thing to do. You chose to do the right thing, even though it could have cost you your job, your safety. I can't even begin to comprehend that kind of integrity. He paused, looking around her small apartment again, his gaze lingering on the drawing of the sun. "I came here to do two things," he said, his voice firming with resolve. "The first is to thank you, but words are not enough. Not for this." He reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a check. He held it out to her. Elena looked down. It was a cashier's check made out to Elena Petrova. The amount written on the line made her gasp. She couldn't even process the number of zeros. It was more money than she could ever dream of making in 10 lifetimes. "I can't take this," she whispered, shaking her head. "I didn't do it for money." "I know," Julian said gently. "That's why you deserve it. This isn't a payment, Elena. It's a fresh start. It's a thank you in a language the world understands. It's for your daughter's college education. It's for a new house in a safe neighborhood. It's for you to never have to worry about a Jenga tower of bills again." He placed the check on her small coffee table. "But that's not the main reason I'm here." Elena looked at him confused. "An act of integrity like yours is rare," he said, his voice filled with a newfound intensity. "It's more valuable than any stock, any algorithm, any asset I own. My company, my life, was almost destroyed because I put my trust in the wrong person. I've spent the last few hours cleaning house, not just financially, but personally. My circle of trust has been decimated." He took a step closer. "I need people I can trust. People with character. People who do the right thing when no one is watching. That's why I'm here. I'm not just offering you money, Elena. I'm offering you a job." Elena stared at him, utterly bewildered. "A job, Mr. Croft. I'm a waitress. I have a high school diploma and half a community college degree. What kind of job could I possibly do for a company like yours?" "The most important one," he replied without hesitation. "I'm creating a new position, an executive ombudsman. You wouldn't report to a department head or a vice president. You would report directly to me." He saw the look of incomprehension on her face and elaborated. "Your job would be to be you, to observe, to listen, to be the eyes and ears of this company at a human level, to talk to the engineers, the janitors, the administrative assistants, to hear their concerns, their ideas, their warnings, to be the person anyone in my organization can go to anonymously and without fear of reprisal if they see something wrong. You would be my early warning system. Your only qualification is the one thing I now value above all others, your character. Elena was speechless. The idea was so audacious, so far outside the realm of her reality, that she couldn't process it. Her in the gleaming glass tower of Croft Innovations, her reporting directly to the CEO. It sounded like a fantasy. I wouldn't know the first thing about corporate culture, she stammered. Good, Julian said with a decisive nod. Corporate culture is what allowed Marcus to operate for 2 years without anyone raising a red flag. Everyone was too scared, too siloed, too focused on their own metrics to see the bigger picture. You see the bigger picture. You saw it in a 10-minute phone call. He gestured around her apartment. This life, the one where you're constantly worried about making ends meet, it's over. If you want it to be. The check on the table ensures that. But the job is about your future. It's about taking the same courage and perception you showed me and using it to protect the livelihoods of the 2,000 people who work for me. People who, like you, just want to do their jobs and provide for their families. The weight of his offer began to sink in. It wasn't charity. He wasn't giving her a handout because he felt sorry for her. He was offering her a position of immense trust and responsibility. He saw a value in her that she had never seen in herself. He wasn't just offering to change her circumstances, he was offering to change her life's purpose. Her thoughts flew to Lily. What would this mean for her? A life without worry. A mother who wasn't exhausted all the time. A future filled with possibilities she had never dared to imagine. But fear lingered. Could she do it? Could she step into that world and not be eaten alive? As if reading her mind, Julian's expression softened. You won't be alone. I'll provide any training you need. Business courses, management seminars, anything. But the core of the job, that can't be taught. You already have it. He paused. Elena, you trusted your instincts to help a stranger. Now I'm asking you to trust me. She looked from the life-altering check on her coffee table to the earnest, determined face of the man offering her a new identity. Waitress. Ombudsman. It was a dizzying leap. She thought of the dismissive look in Marcus Thorne's eyes. He had seen her as nothing, a non-entity. And yet she was the one who had brought his empire of lies crashing down. Perhaps Julian was right. Perhaps her perspective wasn't a weakness, but a strength. A slow, steady resolve began to build within her. The same resolve that had pushed her to write on that napkin. It was the scariest decision of her life. And just like the last one, she knew it was the right one. Okay, she said, her voice, barely a whisper, but clear and firm. Yes, I'll do it. A genuine relieved smile broke across Julian Croft's face, the first she had seen that day. It was like the sun breaking through the clouds. Good, he said. Welcome to the company. He handed her a business card. This is my personal cell number. My assistant will call you this afternoon to begin the onboarding process. Take a few weeks. Use the check to get your life in order. Find a new place to live, a new school for your daughter. Start whenever you're ready. He walked to the door and paused, turning back to her. Oh, and Eleanor. Yes, that car, he said, nodding towards the Bentley on the street. It's yours. Consider it a company car. Her jaw dropped. What I can't. I don't even know how to drive a car like that. He chuckled, a real warm sound this time. You'll learn. It's armored, by the way, just in case. His smile faded slightly, a reminder of the danger that had precipitated all of this. Marcus won't be a problem for much longer, but I'm not taking any more chances. Not with the people I trust. And with that, he was gone. Elena stood in the middle of her living room, the silence ringing in her ears. She looked at the check at the business card and through the window at the impossible, beautiful car parked at her curb. It was real, all of it. Her life, as she knew it, was over. A new one was just beginning. While Elena was processing the seismic shift in her life, Julian Croft was driving back downtown, the brief warmth of his meeting with her, replaced by a glacial calm. The betrayal still burned, but now it fueled a cold, methodical purpose. It was time to face the ghost. He had arranged the confrontation with meticulous care. Not in a boardroom, not in an office, but in the place where their dream had been born, the small, dusty garage behind his first rented house, which he still owned. It was where they had spent countless sleepless nights, fueled by cheap pizza and ambition, sketching out the first lines of code for what would become Croft Innovations. When Marcus arrived, summoned by a terse, unexplainable message from Julian, he looked confused. "Julian, what is this? Why are we meeting here? We're going to be late for the board meeting." Julian stood in the center of the garage, surrounded by old white boards, covered in faded equations and diagrams. The air was thick with the ghosts of their shared past. "The meeting's been cancelled," Julian said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "What or why is something wrong with Nightingale?" Marcus asked. A flicker of something was at panic in his eyes. "You could say that," Julian said. He gestured to a small table he had set up. On it was a single laptop. "Before we talk, I want you to look at something." Warily, Marcus walked over and looked at the screen. It was open to a secure banking portal. The master account in the Cayman Islands. His secret account. And on the screen in bold red letters was the current balance, 0,200. Marcus staggered back as if he'd been physically struck. The color drained from his face. "What? How? That's impossible." "Is it?" Julian asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "I brought in a friend, Arthur Davies. You might not remember him. He helped us during the NetSphere acquisition. Turns out he's very, very good at finding things that are supposed to stay hidden." Julian started to walk slowly around Marcus, circling him like a predator. "He found it all, Marcus. The shell corporations, the falsified reports, the back door in Nightingale, the plan to crash the stock and buy me out with my own money." Marcus's composure shattered. His face, usually a mask of charming confidence, crumpled into a snarl of desperation and rage. "You can't prove any of it. It's my word against some washed-up accountant." "It's not just his word," Julian said, stopping in front of him. He tossed a small audio recorder onto the table. "You made a call yesterday from the Daily Grind. You were waiting for me. You got a little careless. You said some things." He pressed play, and Marcus's own voice filled the garage, cold and cruel. "He won't suspect a thing. The liquidation of the offshore holdings has to be seamless. He'll be left with nothing. A sentimental fool." The recording ended. The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus stared at Julian, his breathing ragged his face, a mask of disbelief and hatred. "Why?" Julian asked the one-word question filled with the weight of a decade of friendship. "Why, Marcus? We were brothers. I gave you everything. You gave me a job." Marcus finally exploded, his voice cracking with a venomous resentment that had clearly been festering for years. "You gave me a title, but it was always your company, your name on the building, your face on the magazines. I was the one managing the money, making the deals, turning your nerdy little projects into a billion-dollar empire. But I was always in your shadow, the loyal friend, the sidekick. I deserved more. You deserved more than $500 million in stock options, and the trust of the one person on earth who would have taken a bullet for you. Julian shot back his own voice, finally rising with the agony of the betrayal. You had everything, and you threw it all away. I was taking what was mine, Marcus screamed. You were taking nothing, Julian said, his voice dropping back to an icy calm. While we've been talking, my security team has been escorting federal agents to your office. Arthur has handed over a mountain of evidence that will put you in prison for a very, very long time. Your accounts are frozen. Your assets are seized. It's over. The fight went out of Marcus Thorne all at once. He collapsed onto an old stool, his head in his hands, a broken man in a bespoke suit, surrounded by the ruins of his own greed. Julian looked at him one last time, at the man he had once called a brother, and felt nothing but a vast, empty pity. He turned and walked out of the garage, not looking back, leaving the ghosts and the traitor behind. 6 weeks later. The sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Julian Croft's office on the top floor of the Croft Innovations Tower. But Julian wasn't in his office. He was standing in the slightly smaller one next to it. The office was simple, elegant, and comfortable. On the wall was a single piece of art, a professionally framed crayon drawing of a smiling sun. Elena Petrova stood by the window, looking out over the city of Austin. She was wearing a stylish but professional dark blue dress. Her hair was different. Her expression was different. The weariness in her eyes was gone, replaced by a focused, confident light. She was still Elena, but she was a new version of herself. "How's Lily liking the new school?" Julian asked from the doorway. Elena turned a genuine smile on her face. "She loves it. She told me yesterday she wants to be an engineer just like you. We could always use another good one." He smiled back. "Are you settling in all right?" "I am," she said, her gaze sweeping over her new office. "It's still a little overwhelming. But I had my first anonymous tip yesterday. An accountant in payroll noticed some irregularities in an expense report. It was small, but it was the kind of thing that would have been ignored before. We looked into it. We fixed it." "See," Julian said. "You're already making a difference." She walked over to her new desk. On it sat a small framed photo of her and Lily laughing in the park of their new safe neighborhood. Next to it was a single cheap paper napkin preserved in a small glass case. A reminder. "You know," Elena said thoughtfully, "when I was working at the diner, I used to look up at this building and wonder what it was like up here. It felt like another planet." "And now?" he asked. "Now," she said, looking at him with a gratitude that went beyond money or jobs. "I know it's just a building. The people inside are what matter, the good and the bad." Julian nodded his own expression, reflecting a hard-won wisdom. "It took me almost losing everything to learn that lesson." He had lost a friend, but gained a perspective that was priceless. And he had found an ally in the most unlikely of places. The future of his company was uncertain, the path forward littered with legal battles and restructuring. But for the first time in a long time, he felt secure. He had an early warning system. He had Eleanor. As the sun set over the Texas hills, casting long shadows and painting the sky in hues of orange and gold, a new day was dawning for them both. 3 months after Marcus Thorne's downfall, Elena Petrova's life was unrecognizable. Her world was now a sunlit condo, a top-tier school for Lily, and a sleek black Bentley. She drove with newfound confidence, But inside the executive wing of Croft Innovations, she remained an anomaly. While some saw her as a symbol of the company's new commitment to integrity, she knew many senior staff still saw the Waitress a sentimental project of a CEO rocked by betrayal. Elena found her footing not in the boardroom, but in the employee cafeteria and the quiet coding pods. She did what she had always done, she listened. She learned that the company's real pulse wasn't in its stock price, but in the hushed conversations over coffee. Her first true test arrived in the form of David Hayes, a brilliant, nerve-racked engineer from the company's flagship, Project Chimera. He appeared at her office door, clutching a tablet like a shield. "Ms. Petrova," he began, "I was told I could speak to you in confidence." "Of course, David. Call me Elena," she said gently. He explained that Chimera, a revolutionary AI security platform, had a rare but catastrophic vulnerability. Under a specific complex attack, the AI, instead of defending the system, would actively lower its defenses. His vice president, Robert Wallace, a 20-year company veteran, had dismissed the risk as infinitesimal and ordered him to sign off on the final stability report. The Q4 launch date was immovable. "Signing off would be a lie," David whispered, his face pale with stress. "It's a ticking time bomb. Wallace just sees the deadline. He doesn't see the echo of what almost happened." Elena felt a familiar chill. This wasn't the overt greed of Marcus Thorne. It was something more insidious, a cultural rot where deadlines mattered more than truth. Instead of leveraging an authority, she barely had Elena investigated discreetly. A few hours spent talking to junior engineers confirmed everything. They all knew about the flaw which they called the ghost in the machine. They were being pressured to ignore it by Wallace, who had promised a significant launch bonus contingent on meeting the deadline without distracting delays. Her final stop was Wallace's office. He greeted her with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Elena, come to absorb some of our corporate wisdom. I have concerns about the Chimera launch," she began, keeping her voice even. "There are no concerns," he countered smoothly. "The project is on time and on budget. I've heard reports of a vulnerability," she pressed. Wallace's smile tightened. "You've been listening to engineers. They're artists, not businessmen. My job is to know when a product is ready, and Chimera is ready. Even with a known flaw that could expose our clients, a theoretical flaw," he snapped his voice, turning hard. "A risk I am paid to assess and accept. I'll thank you not to second-guess my 2 decades of experience. Your role here is to listen to complaints about the cafeteria, food not interfere with product launches." The insult, the dismissal of her as the waitress, hung in the air. The old Elena would have withered. But that woman was gone. "With all due respect, Mr. Wallace," she said, her voice quiet but firm as steel, "my role is to protect this company from unacceptable risk. A lie, no matter how small, is an unacceptable risk. I learned that lesson in a diner. I'm surprised you haven't learned it in a boardroom." Armed with proof, Elena didn't just bring Julian a problem, she brought him a solution. Her report was concise and powerful, laying out the facts, the ethical breach, and a clear path forward. Delay the launch to the next quarter, and be transparent about the reason. Turn the flaw into a public demonstration of the new Croft Innovations' commitment to integrity. Julian read her report in silence. He was faced with a difficult choice: back his loyal, long-serving VP or the unproven ombudsman who now represented his company's soul. He didn't hesitate. "Make it happen," he said. The next day, a company-wide announcement delayed Project Chimera. Robert Wallace was publicly reassigned to a non-critical division. David Hayes was promoted to lead a new product integrity division, reporting directly to Elena. The message was clear and immediate. The old way of doing business was over. That evening, Julian found her at her desk. "Walk with me," he asked, leading her to the rooftop helipad as dusk settled over Austin. "You were right," he said, looking out at the sparkling city. "The board is furious, but I feel like we're finally on solid ground." "Honesty is solid ground," she replied. He turned to her, his expression serious. "I brought you here for your integrity, but you've done more than just have it. You're making it an active verb, teaching us all what it means." He paused. "The debt I owe you seems to grow every day." "You don't owe me anything, Julian," she said, her heart stirring. "You gave me a chance." "You earned it," he corrected her. "And then some." In the quiet moment, high above the city, an unspoken current passed between them. It was a connection forged in crisis, and now tempered in mutual respect. Elena knew her journey was far from over, but she was no longer just a survivor of a past betrayal. She was the architect of a more honest future. And so a simple act of courage on a rainy Tuesday afternoon didn't just save a fortune. It forged an unbreakable bond of trust and created a future no one could have predicted. Elena Petrova went from serving coffee to serving as the conscience of a billion-dollar corporation, proving that integrity is a currency more valuable than money. Julian Croft learned the painful lesson that the greatest threats often come from those standing closest to you, and the greatest saviors can be complete strangers. Their story is a powerful reminder that you never know the impact one right decision can have. It teaches us to listen to that small voice inside that tells us something is wrong, and to have the courage to speak up even when we're scared. If this story of betrayal, courage, and unexpected redemption moved you, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that good people are still out there. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel for more incredible true stories that prove one person can and does make all the difference. What would you have done in Eleanor's shoes? Let us know in the comments below.